And yeah, so I picked a few verses that had been on my mind for a while, and I wanted to share with you, perhaps in line with our earlier discussions in how to develop a logical way to interpret the Mus'haf. So there is there is no specific theme to my talk today or my discussion with you today, as opposed to when we covered qata'a, the hand, what it implies, and other thematic topics. So this is not thematic per se. I will choose three concepts and the verses that relate to them to try to understand what these verses mean, and we may be in for a surprise, in the sense that the interpretation may not be comfortable to some, or it may not be expected. But we'll see what we will do. Okay, so I recently I came across a very interesting saying by Einstein, or an incident, or a story. I don't know if it's fully accurate or not, but it seems it was. He gave, maybe some of you heard it, Einstein gave an exam one year, and he had certain questions for the senior class of physics, and the next year he gave the same questions for the same class. And one of his assistants told him, but you gave these questions last year. And his answer was, the answers have changed. So this may apply to our discussions as we explore together, trying to understand the Mus'haf. Now, if we start with Einstein's alleged story, the questions, the answers may change, but the physics does not change. Okay, so I think that's very, very important for us to keep in mind. So the haqq, the reality will not change, but our interpretation may improve, may be refined. We hope to be going in that direction. So if we start with a prelude to what I will first discuss, is the difference between qist and adil. And I'm sure you have come across these words, yaqsut, ya'dil, right? Just a very quick question, Brother Mumtaz, have you ever thought about these two words or the difference between them? Yaqsut, ya'dil.
Not much.
Okay, so can I let me see. I want to share with you some of the Quran verses. Can I do I have permission to share the screen?
Yes. Okay, just a minute.
I think I can. Yeah.
Yeah, you can share it now.
Okay, so I will share my screen here. Share. All right, do you see the Quran?
Not. Yeah.
Do you?
No, not yet.
Not yet?
No.
Okay, it's interesting because it just popped up one more time. Let me see here. Okay, you don't see it. Okay, because of time, we don't want to complicate things. I'm referring to verse 49:9, Surah 49:9. And according to my system, it's supposed to be shared, but I don't know why it's not being shared. Okay. Hello?
Hello? Yeah.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, it says you are screen sharing. I'll stop the screen sharing.
Oh, stop or just?
I just stopped right now. But if you have access to I don't know why my screen froze, but you can hear me, right?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, then let me continue. I don't know why my computer had been acting strangely lately. So the verse is Surah 49, Al-Hujurat, and verse 9. وإن طائفتان من المؤمنين اقتتلوا فاصلحوا بينهما فإن بغت إحداهما على الأخرى فقاتلوا التي تبغى حتى تفيء إلى أمر الله فإن فاءت فأصلحوا بينهما بالعدل واقسطوا إن الله يحب المقسطين. Okay.
Yeah, brother Umar, yours. Yeah, now we are seeing.
Okay. There's some delay for some reason. I don't know why. Oops, sorry. Okay. So do you see? So you see the verse in front of you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And I want you to pay careful attention to the word here. بالعدل. You see my cursor, right?
Yes.
Okay. بالعدل وأقسطوا. Right.
Yeah. Yes.
So this tells me.
Please mute your computers. Ibrahim, please, brothers, mute your computers.
Yeah,
Okay.
the rest of the brothers and sisters, probably it's better to mute. So what we notice here, starting very slowly, and I want to use the primordial logical elements that we talked about in the past, the wow, the aw, thumma, idha, and so forth. Allah says, فَاصْلِحُوا بَيْنَهُمَا بِالْعَدْلِ وَأَقْسِطُوا. So in other words, adil is one thing and qist is another thing, right? Adil is one thing, just by looking at the structure of this verse. Now, if we see something like Dr. Ghali's translation, let's just focus on what we are interested in, the two words, adil and qist. And in case two sections of the believers fight each other, then make a righteous reconciliation between them both. Literally, let's skip this. Then in case one of them is inequitable, okay, then in case one of them is inequitable, okay, to the other, we can debate the different aspects of the translation. I'm not interested in all the verse at this time except one thing, which is adil and qist. So let's continue. Then in case one of them is inequitable to the other, then fight the one that is inequitable until it concedes to the command of Allah. So in case it concedes, okay, then make a reconciliation between them with, this is the key point, adil wa aqsitu, both with justice. So he translated adil as justice, which I agree with, okay, and be equitable, wa aqsitu, and be equitable, okay. This translation is, in my opinion, is quite, as far as adil and qist, is very, very strong, and I agree with it. Okay, why am I starting with this? You will know in a second. I'm trying to see, number one, is there a difference between adil and qist? Okay, if we look here, obviously these are two different things. Adil is one thing and qist is another thing. Okay, now I went to Dr. Ghali's translation, which I think in my opinion, he gets things right many times, not all the time. No one can get things right all the time. It's not to discredit him, but in comparison to other translations, okay, you find that qist al-muqsitin is translated as those who uphold justice, okay, for instance, by Dr. Mustafa Khattab. Okay, that I don't agree with it. Justice is not qist. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. If you look at another translation, English translation, Pictal, maybe Dr. Ghali followed that. Yes, we see something similar. He differentiates between justice and equity. Okay, between justice and equity. So another translation, Irving, he translates qist as fairness, which is a bit vague. Okay, so why did I start with this? First of all, to point out that there's a difference. Adil is different from verse number 1. Number 2, it is sometimes, and many at times actually, both of them considered as to mean justice. Okay, but that's not the case. All right, so having established that, we want to look at, let's look while we are at this juncture, let's look at 2147. 2147. Okay, so I'm looking for words that have qist in them. Okay, let's read this. وَنَضَعَ الْمَوَازِينَ الْقِسْطِ نضع الموازين القسط ليوم القيامة. ونضع الموازين القسط ليوم القيامة. So qist, and in يوم القيامة, the latter day, the resurrection. Allah is specifically saying qiyamah, resurrection. Okay, and not يوم الحساب. He's not talking about يوم الحساب here. Notice, right? It's different. يوم القيامة is not necessarily يوم الحساب. Okay. نضع الموازين القسط. Interesting. There is qist يوم القيامة, not adil. Amazing. It's just something to keep in mind when we sensitize ourselves, to this. We will actually get a better perspective on what we are interested in yet to come next. All right. So, and before we go further, just as a side point, there's muqsitin in the Mus'haf, and there's qasitun. Muqsitin and qasitun. Okay, they sound very similar, but one, al-muqsitin, Allah likes the muqsitin. But al-qasitun, guess what? They are in hellfire. Amazing. Qasitun, they are in hellfire. Muqsitin, they are loved by Allah. Okay, so this is another side, a footnote to tell us that the classical Arabic language and Arabic cannot explain that to us. Okay, only the Mus'haf tells us that there's a difference between the two. Now we go to the verse that I'm interested in. Okay, and that is 4:3. Very, very, very famous and contentious verse. Okay, very famous and contentious verse. My computer is okay. Here we go. وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تُقْسِطُوا فِي الْيَتَامَى. All of you can see the verse right now on my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I have some, maybe because I have so many windows open on my computer, that's why it's acting funny. Anyways, وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تُقْسِطُوا فِي الْيَتَامَى فَانكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ مَثْنَى وَثُلَاثَ وَرُبَاعَ فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا فَوَاحِدَةً أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ ذَلِكَ أَدْنَىٰ أَلَّا تَعُولُوا. This is extremely, not the verse is contentious. There's no such thing as a verb which is contentious, but the interpretation of it and what people have done with this verse is extremely contentious. Okay, now what is the verse? What does this verse talk about? The theme. Notice with me, please. The theme is yatama. Allah has given yatama a lot of attention in the Mus'haf. Yatama. Okay, so what are the yatama? Let me see. I just wrote some points so that I will have a logical discussion here. Okay, I'm done with the first one. So what are the yatama? Yatama, okay, we learned from, if we use those databases on the Mus'haf, we put yatama, and it comes up with many, I don't know, 22 or more occurrences. The first impression is that there are people who have not reached maturity. Literally, people who have not reached maturity, okay? We call them nowadays those who have not reached adulthood, okay? In terms of sexual development, but that's not all. But in terms of physiological, psychological development, okay? And we know that there are rules for adults around the world, and there are rules for non-adults around the world, everywhere you go, everywhere you go. All right. So al-yatama, for instance, if we look at al-yatama in 1882, and then I will come back to this. Okay, this is the key verse that I'm interested in. But let's go quickly to 18 just to get a perspective. Okay, on who are the yatama that Allah is talking about? Look, وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تُقْسِطُوا فِي الْيَتَامَى. Okay, so the focus on this verse, the focus is what? Yatama, right? All right. So before we continue trying to understand this verse, let's see an occurrence where yatama showed up earlier, or elsewhere rather. 1882, okay? Here is the story of the prophet Musa when he was accompanied by that wise man. Some people refer to him as the Khadr, okay? The Quran doesn't use that word anyways. And when he accompanied him, and Musa was impatient, we all know that story, and he kept telling the wise man, why did you do this 3 times? And he told him, you will not have patience with me. Okay, we're not interested in this story right now. We're interested in the word yatimaini. وَأَمَّا الْجِدَارِ فَكَانَ لِغُلَامَيْنِ يَتِيمَيْنِ. Notice, the wall belonged to yatimain, two. Ghulam is not necessarily boy, okay? But let's say boy for now. Let's not complicate things. But yatimaini here, okay, the implication, which I believe in, is that they were not mature. They were not adults, but mature is more broad than not adults. If we see here يتيمين في المدينة وكان تحته كنز لهما وكان أبوهما صالحا فأراد ربك أن يبلغا أشدهما. Allah wanted them to reach maturity. So clearly that the yatim is someone who has not reached maturity, strength. It doesn't have to be, strength is a bit relative, right? A woman can become mature, but she can be a very weak person. She could be 5 feet 3 inches, and she can be crushed by a boy who is 15-year old. So it's not necessarily physical strength, okay? So here we have, Allah is talking about yatimaini, and he's telling us that they have not reached their strength, their maturity. And I meant, strength is in a broad way. All right. So now let's go back to the other one, 4:3. Okay. So this verse is talking about the yatama. Okay. The yatama. All right. Now, this verse had been understood broadly, 99.9% of Muslims, as far as I could tell, is that it regulates the number of women that a man can marry, okay? But I really don't see any relevance to that at all in this, if we parse it very, very carefully, okay? See, the classical usage, which is male-dominated, of course, but many women also believe in it, is that they take the verse, the first clause, وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تُقْسِطُوا فِي الْيَتَامَى. You see, the first clause starts with وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تُقْسِطُوا فِي الْيَتَامَى. If, let's say, loosely speaking, and in case you fear that you will not act equitably towards the orphans. I agree with this translation largely, very much, okay? And in case you fear that you will not act equitably towards the orphans. So now this is a conditional statement, isn't it? This is a conditional statement. So the first condition must happen for the other to follow. If P, then Q, right? فانكحوا ما طاب لكم من النساء مثنى وثلاثا ورباعا. Let's stop here. Let's say the second clause. فانكحوا ما طاب لكم من النساء مثنى وثلاثا ورباعا. So the majority of Muslims, they focus on فانكحوا ما طاب لكم من النساء مثنى وثلاثا ورباعا. By the way, I'm not interested in this discussion to talk about polygamy. For me, it's very simple. As far as I know, and based on the Mus'haf, a man can marry, there's no limit to how many a man can marry, but that's not our subject today. Okay, we can discuss that later. But we want to understand how we interpret these verses, whose interpretation can be contentious, in my opinion, for no reason, because as Allah warns, Allah says, don't chop the verses. الذين أخذوا القرآن عضين. Those who chop verses. Okay, so if I tell you if P then Q, and you and I take the P, okay, and I take the P, and then I take the word then I'll say Q. You know, I've done a lot of injustice. All right, so now. So here the phrase وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تُقْسِطُوا فِي الْيَتَامَى, if you fear, I love the translation by Dr. Ghali, in case you fear that you will not act equitably towards the orphans. Okay, now فَانْكِحُوا, let's say marry for now. Okay, let's say marry. Okay, then marry what you please. Okay, he says ma taba lakum. Okay, what he translates as good to you. Okay, it's fine. There's no problem with that translation. Ma taba lakum, what you're comfortable with. But look, what you're comfortable with does not say what is comfortable to the men. What is comfortable with to you, plural. What is your comfortable to you? Then there's very interesting three words, mathna wa thulathan wa ruba'. So most clergy said that Allah is saying then you marry 2 or 3 or 4. Now Allah didn't say aw, he said wow, wa. Right? Now, how do they explain that Allah meant wa, not aw, that Allah meant aw, not wow, okay? Despite the fact that aw appears in the Mus'haf. You see? It's very puzzling, isn't it? I mean, you can see that there's no logic in these classical traditional translations. There's no logic at all. So they say that Allah elsewhere in the Mus'haf talks about angels that have ajniha, whatever ajniha means, do ajnihatin mathna wa thulathan wa ruba'. And they say that angels cannot have 9, but they have 2 or 3 or 4. It doesn't click, you know. In other words, they're begging the question. This is classic begging the question fallacy in logic. You know, if you tell me why are you light complex, have a light complexion, I tell you because I have a light complexion. It's exactly that. Okay, it's that brazen. Okay, now, but let's for now, please allow me to not to worry too much about mathna wa thulathan wa ruba'. You know, even, you know, mathna, why didn't Allah say ithnan? Wa thulathan, why didn't Allah say thalatha? Ruba'an, why didn't say Allah arba'a? Right? Now, did Allah say arba'a elsewhere in the Mus'haf? I mean, I'm asking you, does anyone remember where Allah says arba'a in the Mus'haf? When he talks at tayr, here we go, just very quickly. فخذ in 2 Baqarah 2 verse 260, Allah said فخذ أربعة من الطير. Interesting. So why didn't Allah say here أربعة? What is رباعة? Okay, this is not my interest right now, but something to keep in mind. But I'm interested in understanding the big structure of this verse. All right, so far we summarize. If you fear that you will not do equity, you will not be equitable to the orphans. Now, are orphans males or only females? No, they could be males, they could be females, they could be a combination. Makes a lot of sense. Yatama. Whatever Allah refers to yatama, like al-yatama wal-masakin, if you want to give them sadaqah, do you give only the female yatama or the male yatama? No, yatama can be females or they can be males or they can be a combination. So Allah said, if you fear that you will not be equitable in treating the orphans because they have no what? Who is the orphan? Strictly is the one who lost his father and he hasn't matured. So yatama, we sensed it earlier, is that those who have not matured, okay, and those who have lost a father, not a mother. Okay, so for instance, I have lost my father, but you cannot classify me as yatim. Okay, you cannot, right? All right, then Allah is saying, marry their what? فَانْكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ. Now, can a man marry an immature girl? Impossible, right? Why? Okay, why? Because we go to 4:7, and we'll come back to this because this is our interest. 4:7. Let's go to 4:7. للرجال نصيب مما ترك الوالدان والأقربون وللنساء نصيب مما let me see, sorry, not 4:7, 4:6, apologies, this is not the right one. Okay, so وابتلوا اليتامى, here just the first clause, the first phrase, وابتلوا اليتامى حتى إذا بلغوا النكاح. Okay, let's go to Dr. Ghali and try, and I would say try, okay, for now it's okay, try test the orphans until they reach marriageable age. وابتلوا اليتامى حتى إذا بلغوا النكاح. Clearly, yatama are those who have not reached marriageable age. So we learned two things, that yatama are the ones who have not reached marriageable age. Okay, I mean, very, very interesting, by the way, point here to make. And they may reach strength. Okay, and rushda in the Mus'haf most likely has to do with mental capability. Okay, look, فَإِنْ أَنَسْتُمْ مِنْهُمْ رُشْدًا. Okay, so in other words, if they reach marriageable age, they may reach marriageable age. For instance, a girl may become an adult, sexually develop at the age of 15, but she may not be mentally strong to handle larger affairs. Okay, because the first one is a biological development, but there's another one which is psychological, mental development. And Allah specifies it here, وَابْتَلُوا الْيَتَامَى حَتَّى إِذَا بَلَغُوا النِّكَاحَ فَإِنْ أَنَسْتُمْ مِنْهُمْ رُشْدًا. Then if you feel they are capable of sound judgment. Okay, all right. So clearly yatama are the ones who necessarily have not reached marriageable age. All right, so let's go back to this. Okay, the first one. So obviously, I'm sorry, not this one, the 4:3. So clearly right now is that we marry, we ما طاب لكم من النساء, فانكحوا ما طاب لكم من النساء, marry النساء, not the yatama. Do you see my point? We cannot marry the yatama. We can marry the nisa, meaning the mothers of the yatama. The mothers of the yatama. I mean, Allah is expressing things in a very concise, succinct, and strictly logical fashion. Very strict logical fashion. So he did not say here, فَانْكَحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّن نِسَاءِ الْيَتَامَى. Look, what is Allah implying? Allah implying nisa al-yatama, the woman of the yatama. But he did not say that. Why? Because he already talks about yatama here. Extremely concise, precise. Do you see? All right. So now, aside from what this means, 2 or 3 or 4 or 2 and 3 and 4, we leave that to a different discussion. But Allah is definitely, there's a message here, is that Allah is encouraging us, or giving us something to think about. It's not a requirement, by the way. It's not, okay? Because in khiftum, there's a condition. All right. So the verse so far is to help the yatama. It's not to enjoy in sexual pleasures. It's not to increase one's number of wives. It's not. That's separate. That's completely separate. Allah doesn't mind having, for a person to have as much pleasure as they wish. There's no constraint on that. But this verse has nothing to do that. So here we're talking about something that is socially important. How to take care of yatama, and there's tons of yatama around the world, and we completely diverted, the clergy rather, they diverted it to talk about multiple marriages and polygyny. Now let's continue. Something really interesting here. فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا. Okay, so those who are opponents of the classical polygamy argument, they say, oh, but look, Allah says, فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا فَوَاحِدًا, and following Dr. Ghali's translation, in case you fear that you will not do justice, which is, I agree with that, فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا, then only one, or, you see how Allah uses or? Look at this. This is aw, and this is waw. Here's a proof, right, in one verse that waw is different from aw. Okay, and if you fear that you cannot do justice, then one. So the justice here, okay, please focus on this point. The justice that Allah is talking about here, remember I gave that prelude earlier? Now it becomes important because the justice that Allah is talking about here is different from qist, right? Because we're done with the first one. We're done for that. If you fear that you will not be equitable, look, equitable. Sorry. In khiftum alla tuqsitu, if you don't do fairness, I apologize, I may confuse that. If you fear that you will not do fairness. So fairness is someone, fairness is a classical argument. You give someone who is 6 feet tall a lot of clothes, fabric to make a pants, but a 5 feet tall person, you give them less. So that's the justice as far as dressing, clothing these two people who have different in heights. But adil is different, okay? Adil is equitable treatment. Very, very, very fine, subtle point. Adil is equitable treatment, okay? فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا فَوَاحِدًا. Now, here he's not talking about yatama anymore, right? He's talking about what? The mothers of yatama. Nisa al-yatama. The wives, the women of yatama. The women of yatama, by definition, the women of yatama, by the way, might not necessarily be the one who gave birth to the yatim. Amazing. The precision in these verses is mind-boggling, right? Allah says nisa, not ummahat, not walidat. Okay, because we know sometimes a person dies and his aunt takes care of him, right? It happens a lot. Or another woman. Okay, so here Allah says, in khiftum alla ta'dilu, and if you fear that you cannot do justice, okay, if you cannot do justice, then only one. So obviously the one is not the yatama, is the woman. أو ما ملكت أيمانكم. Very, very interesting. أو ما ملكت أيمانكم. The classical interpretation, the traditional, the predominant, the overwhelming, is that Allah is saying, oh, if you don't want to marry, look, if you don't want to marry, then go and have women under the umbrella of ما ملكت أيمانكم, meaning slaves. Right? So do you see how they diverted the context into pleasure and sexual satisfaction? Has nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with that. أو ما ملكت أيمانكم. Well, what does that mean? Okay, or those who your right hand possesses. My understanding is that you take it as a servant. أما ملكت أيمانكم is someone that your right hand possesses, meaning she is your servant. Okay, you don't marry her, but you take her in as a servant. Okay, and the last phrase is ذلك أدنى ألا تعولوا. Allah completes the circle here. ذلك أدنى ألا تعولوا. Now let's see what Dr. Ghali says. That way is likelier you will not be in want. Or look at what he said. I don't know if this was updated or not, possibly. Or you will have too many dependents. That is precisely the meaning. Or you will have too many dependents. So Allah is telling us, be careful, watch out, don't overdo it. You will have too many kids. Ta'ulu from عيال, ala, those who you take care of, dependents. Okay. All right. Now let's see. Okay. I want to take. If we go to 2, the one, also sometimes we really need to go to the verse before it, for 2. Look, I mean, this has nothing to do again with marriage. It has to do with yatama. Allah starts for 2 with وَآتُوا الْيَتَامَ أَمْوَالَهُم. Look at the beginning. Be careful. Give the yatama their dues, their money. All right? So this is a proof that the focus is yatama. I want to go in the again Surah An-Nisa to 127. 127. Okay. Allah says, وَيَسْتَفْتُونَكَ فِي النِّسَاءِ قُلْ اللَّهُ يُفْتِيكُمْ فِيهِنَّ. And they ask you about Nisa. I'll tell you why I'm flashing this in front of you to make a point. It will come clear in a second. قُلْ اللَّهُ يُفْتِيكُمْ فِيهِنَّ وما يتلى عليكم في الكتاب في يتامى النساء اللاتي لا تؤتونهن ما كتب لهن وترغبون أن تنكحوهن والمستضعفين من الولدان وإن تقوموا لليتامى بالقسط وما تفعلوا من خير فإن الله كان به عليما. Very, very, very loaded verse, honestly. وَيَسْتَفْتُونَكَ فِي النِّسَاءِ, and they ask you about women. Nisa, women. قُلْ Allah yuftikum fihinna. Allah pronounces what's concerning them. Allah. Look how clear. Allah, not Muhammad. Allah is the one who will answer you. وَمَا يُتْلَى عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الْكِتَابِ, and what had been recited to you in the book. And guess what? And we just read some of those verses. Okay? وَمَا يُتْلَى عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الْكِتَابِ فِي يَتَامَى النِّسَاءِ. Okay? Let me use so that we don't lose anyone. Let me use Dr. Ghali's translation. Allah pronounces concerning them and what is recited to you, وَمَا يُتْلَى عَلَيْكُمْ, in the book concerning the orphan women. The orphan women. Okay? You know, orphan women, and no, I noticed that Dr. Ghali added something between parentheses. Look, or possibly women who have orphans. Okay? Yatama, or women who have orphans. Okay. Dr. Ghali is saying concerning orphan women or possibly women who have orphans. Now let's look at this. What's Allah saying? Yatama and nisa. These are not women. Yatama and nisa, the orphans of women. Do you see the difference? It's not women who have orphans. It's the orphans of women. Okay. Yatama and nisa. All right. Now, allati la tu'tunahunna ma kutiba lahunna wa targhabuna an tankihuhunna wal mustad'afina. Let's stop here. Wa targhabuna an tankihuhunna. So the first time I looked at this, I said, wait a minute, that shoots the earlier interpretation. Allah is saying, Yatama Nisa, the orphans, that Yatama. Let's just leave the word Yatama. Those that you do not give them what had been made possible in terms of allocation. Ma kutiba lahunna. Notice, ma kutiba lahunna. It's not what ma furida lahunna. So la tu'tunahunna ma kutiba lahunna. The first thing one would say, well, Allah, why don't you say give them what has been written for them? No, he said wala tu'tuhunna ma kutiba lahunna. Kutiba lahunna is not what had been ordained for them. Okay, that's one interesting point to focus on. The other equally interesting, وَتَرْغَبُونَ أَن تَنْكِحُوهُنَّ, and you desire to what? To marry them. Okay, so if Allah is talking about the yatama here, if Allah is talking about the yatama, and here he is saying, and you have a desire to marry them, okay? Then it really shoots down my earlier interpretation is 4:3. وإن خفتم أن تقسطوا في اليتامى فانكحوا ما طاب لكم من النساء, because I argued there that you marry the women of the orphans, okay? So if here is Allah saying you desire to marry the yatama, then things don't make any sense. However, let's look very carefully what Allah is saying. وَمَا يُتْلَى عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الْكِتَابِ فِي يَتَامَى النِّسَاءِ اللَّاتِي. We cannot stop here. Okay, فِي يَتَامَى النِّسَاءِ. If you stop, fine, but the continuation, okay, the continuation will have to be considered based on what is yet to come. So here, one more time. وَمَا يُتْلَى عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الْكِتَابِ مِنْ يَتَامَى النِّسَاءِ اللَّاتِي, those that do not give them what had been possibly allocated for them, and you desire to marry them. So who is this referring to? تنكحوهن. Nisa. Do you see? Not yatama. Not yatama nisa. Do you see my point? يتامى النساء اللاتي لا تؤتونهن ما كتب لهن وترغبون أن تنكحوهن. I hope this point is clear. Okay. Very, very important point. Here, the ترغبون أن تنكحوهن, okay, goes way back to النساء, not يتامى النساء. Because if that is not correct, then the other verse, when Allah says you cannot marry until they reach maturity, is null and void. Okay. All right. All right. So this is as far as this verse is concerned. I will make a few remarks about two important other verses, and then we can open it for discussion. The first one, maybe I will defer that till later because it's kind of a different subject, but it had been. I've been thinking about two verses. I'll share them with you very quickly. The first one is 2:187. Okay. Again, what we're trying in today's discussion is to develop a proper methodology to interpret the Mus'haf. That's all. Okay. So we all came from the month of fasting, and sometimes I see around me people whose Ramadan it turns into a nightmare. I've seen it with my own eyes. Okay, those who are addicted to smoking, for instance. I know someone who is addicted to smoking, and he literally jails himself in one of the rooms in his house, and nobody sees him until the iftar time, because he becomes nervous, agitated. You know, he can actually create a lot of damage in this month of Ramadan. And that what made me think about what are we should be abstained from. I go back to Surah Baqarah 2 verse 187, and Allah very clearly says that you know, at the night of Ramadan, of Siyam, whenever you want to fast, the night of it, you are allowed to have intimacy with your nisa. Okay, with your nisa, not zawjatukum, more broad, nisa. Okay. So أحل لكم ليلة الصيام الرفث إلى نسائكم. Okay, so this is the first thing, is that what we allowed, we are allowed in the night of Siyam to have intimacy with our nisa. Okay. But I want to jump right now to this. Washrabu, and then Allah says, Wakulu washrabu, and eat and drink. Eat and drink. Clearly, eat and drink. We know what a drinking is. We know what eating is. حتى يتبين لكم الخيط الأبيض من الخيط الأسود, until you can distinguish between the black thread and the white thread. In other words, it's a method to be able to distinguish if the sunrise, or you know, sunrise is the sun is emerging. That's not my point. My point is that in Siyam, Allah is saying, okay, at the night of Siyam, you are allowed intimacy with your nisa. Number two, do not eat and drink. Okay. In Ramadan, in Siyam. Okay, there's no Ramadan mentioned here, but Ramadan has Siyam in it. Okay. ثم أتموا الصيام إلى الليل. So ثم أتموا الصيام إلى الليل, continue Siyam until night. ولا تباشروهن وأنتم عاكفون في المساجد, and do not, you know, Allah is talking about two different things. First of all, rafath, intimacy, maybe, and then the other one, tubashiruhunna, most likely to have a sexual intercourse, most likely, based on the other, you know, intersecting all the verses in the Mus'haf. But it's really interesting, Allah saying, and do not have engage with them in a sexual fashion. وَأَنْتُمْ عَاكِفُونَ فِي الْمَسَاجِدِ. Now, does it make really sense that if عاكفون في المساجد implies that you are in a masjid, in a mosque and praying, that you may bring your wife to sleep with you? It sounds preposterous. Okay, so this is the second point that we infer from this verse, is that fil masajid is not, I don't think it refers to the what we call houses of worship or the mosque. Okay, summary. The first is that in Ramadan, we cannot, during the day, we cannot have intimacy with our wives. We cannot drink and we cannot eat. So what about smoking? Clearly that it's not one of those prohibited things, isn't it? You know, I really don't think that smoking is one of those prohibited things. Okay, inhaling something is not eating it and is not drinking it. It goes into one's lungs. It does not go into one's stomach. Does that mean I'm an advocate of smoking? Of course not. We know that it's extremely harmful. This is the second point I wanted to share with you. And because of time, I'll share the last point. And I was walking recently and saw a huge banner outside the masjid in Palestine. And the banner has the verse that many people put it outside masajid. Okay, 9:18. إنما يعمر مساجد الله من آمن بالله واليوم الآخر وأقام الصلاة وآتى الزكاة ولم يخشى إلا الله فعسى أولئك أن يكونوا من المهتدين. If we take Dr. Ghali's translation, surely he only shall tend the mosques of Allah, who has believed in Allah and the last day and kept up the prayer and brought the zakat, and so on till the end of it. Now, I'm really thinking about the logical structure of this verse, the logical structure. Allah says, if I were to say, those who are the winners, those who are winners are, or the winners are those who fulfill A, B, C, D. So if you fulfill A, B, C, D, then you are a winner. Okay, that's the definition of a winner. It is not who wins. Okay, if someone wins, he has fulfilled these definitions, these criteria. Okay, if someone wins, the implication is that he fulfilled these criteria. How do we define a winner? How do we define a winner? Is the one who fulfilled these criteria. So this verse, I don't think it relates to in remotely or in any possible way to the person who enters the so-called mosques. Okay, so the one who ya'mur, whatever ya'mur means, okay, whatever ya'mur means, okay, and whatever masajid means, okay, if I don't know, look, if I don't know what ya'mur is and masajid is, and I would combine these two together, then the one who ya'mur masajid Allah, okay, is the one who strictly satisfied, one, he has believed in Allah and the latter day, and he has aqam as-salah and ata az-zakah, and he does not fear. Okay, yakhsha is not fear, right? Yakhsha, we talked about yakhsha, that's khawf. Yakhsha is fear and knowing, you know and you fear, okay, combined together more or less, except Allah. If one satisfies these criteria, then that is the one who ya'mur masajid Allah. So it really has nothing to do with those who go and perform the collective ritual prayer in the mosques that are everywhere. All right, so I'll stop right here and we can have a discussion. And inshallah, I hope I added to your knowledge and my knowledge by these few thoughts. Okay, Brother Mumtaz, I'll send it to you right now, and I'll stop sharing.
Thank you very much. It was a great discussion, and you have shown us a new way that words are very precise, and if we look into that, we can explain Quran much better, and that is as Allah wish. So now I open this forum for questions. So anybody who want to ask anything from Dr. Omar? Dr. Hamid, do you have any question? Sorry, Dr. Hamid, Rijaz Saab, if you have any question.
Thank you very much, Brother Umar. That was very good. And a couple of one comment from you. The difference between qist and adil. So as I understand, qist is about giving rights and their dues, and adil is more in treating people equitable. Now, my question is in terms of making laws under the system of being, how will we differentiate in terms of the sub-clauses? I don't know if you have given it anything. And second is in that verse 49, I'm not sure adilun has been used in the Quran, but it ends up with muqsitin. Does muqsitin includes adil as well or not?
Yeah.
And the second is that you pointed out yourself as well, and I was looking in the Lugat that qist is used as antonym as well. But qist means also that something which is not, in terms of not giving rights as well, or opposite. Sorry, too many things I have asked you.
Okay, sure, brother. Thank you. Let me see. Start with the easiest. Allah says, فَاصْلِحُوا بَيْنَهُمَا بِالْعَدْلِ in 49:9. فَاصْلِحُوا بَيْنَهُمَا بِالْعَدْلِ وَأَقْسِطُوا. So that's a starting point, right? That's a starting point that the two are different. Okay, and when we make a qist in yatama, if we were to extrapolate, sorry, before I go that, إن الله قائما بالقسط. You know, إن الله قائما بالقسط. Allah never said إن الله قائما بالعدل, right? So what I infer is that qist aqsata has to do with proportion, has to do with giving someone what is fair and deserving, if I were to use English words, whereas adil is different. وإن خفتم ألا تعدلوا. I'm glad you brought this. Adil, in Arabic, we say mu'adala. Mu'adala is equation. This part has to equal this part. So there's 100% leveling, okay, equality. So Allah uses adil when dealing with, let's say, a person is marrying, let's just stick to the verse, is marrying two women. A man is marrying two women. Adil has to be, is different from qist, in the sense that one woman may desire very little amount of food. She could be vegetarian, you know. I'm not trying to have a patriarchal perspective. Please, if sisters are listening, I'm not. I'm just giving an example from real world, okay? So she may need very little, and yet she may desire to have a trip to visit her family, who are 5,000 miles away. So the ticket is exorbitant. Another woman, the second woman, may have maybe gluttonous, and she wants to eat a lot of meat and all of that, but her family is 5 miles away. So here, you know, qist and adil make clearly the you know, they're different. Now, could adil, now you raised something interesting. I never thought about could adil is a higher level. It's you know, in other words, if one is equitable, then one is automatically make adil. I don't know. I have to parse more words in the Quran, you know, because what Allah doesn't mince words. Allah doesn't joke. When he said, وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا, okay, he didn't say, I mean, in the context of polygamy or multiple wives, he never said, وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَقْسِطُوا. So you're raising something. Maybe we need to understand more into. In other words, this is what I'm thinking, and I'm thinking loud, and I could be wrong. If I have two kids, emotionally, I need to, in certain things, there's no equity in certain things. Here's an example from my experience. I had one daughter, one son. The daughter, at one time, I had to send her to a private school, which I dished a lot of money. I didn't have to do that for the son. He didn't want. He went to a very good school, but it's not private, okay? So I did qist. In my opinion, I did qist. I treated each one fairly based on the circumstances. But when it comes to adil, maybe it has to do with, you know, their emotional needs. They have to be equal. I cannot think. I mean, you raised that. This is we're opening maybe a subject which really needs much more discussion and much more classification of the words in the Mus'haf to see precisely how they're used. And I would love to do that for future studies. But here I'm thinking is that to deal with them emotionally, my son, and I think I had to do adil. Okay, some open thoughts, and if you have something to contribute, brother, you know.
I agree with you. I think spot on. The Aksitu, maybe in a broader sense, is giving them rights, as you rightly give a very good example of your daughter and the son. And emotionally, adil means equitable, because over there as well, Quran says that if you cannot do adil, that is your own limitations of, for example, one woman could be more attractive than the other, then it is better that for the development of your own self or your own nafs, because if you don't do adil, then of course your nafs will be affected, and if nafs is affected, then your hereafter is affected. And of course, as far as this world is concerned, then you will be creating a lot of problems within your own house as well. So we had the discussion on this elsewhere, that why should men be inclined to marry and only then they can do adil, or because they should help others without being in a marital relationship. Because marital relationship always, as you said rightly, the sex comes into it somehow. Men, particularly men who haven't got a well-developed self. Because the whole Quran's effort is to develop ourselves, to raise our eminence, to take us right to the heavenly sort of an elevation where we can see the word the way Quran wants us to see the word. Thank you very much. I think I'll also go through it.
And you just triggered something. Is that when Allah says, because I think you're reiterating something that I meant to emphasize, is when Allah says, وَمَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. Why in the world would He toss that there? You know, I mean, it definitely has nothing to do with the context of pleasure and sex. Absolutely. I mean, we're talking about yatama, you know, yatama. So my interpretation, and I thought about this just early today, I never thought about this before in the morning when I was looking over my notes, is that Allah is saying, then hire her. You see, then hire her, bring the woman of the orphan into your home, you know, and that's how I interpret it, but it has nothing to do with the sex. Brother Ibrahim, I think Brother Ibrahim had been.
Yes. you know, like from like in Surah Nisa regarding you know, like the I guess polygyny, and I kind of interpreted, you know, like even before this like discussion, you know, I looked at the ayats that were before where it mentions about orphans or yatim, you know, like having you know, like being treated fairly and justly, and you know, their property, you know, being, you know, doing right by them with regards to their property, and you know, basically the well-being of the orphan. And what I get from that, you know, when it mentions the ayat afterwards regarding polygyny, is that, you know, sometimes an individual taking care of an orphan, you know, if there is no like connection between that individual and those orphan children, sometimes, you know, it would make it difficult, like for some people to be, you know, like fair or equitable towards the orphan. So I think that in terms of the reason I believe that the marriage part was brought into it was because, like, if you marry a person, then, you know, their children become pretty much your children, you know, your responsibility as though they're your children. So I think that the marriage was a means to create a better bond to where to ensure that the orphan or the yatim would be treated, you know, fairly, you know, or you know, more better, you know, and also sometimes it could be a situation like, you know, okay, the brother mentioned that, you know, why come a person can't just take care of, you know, children, you know, just out of the generosity. Well, sometimes it could be a situation in which, you know, you may have the children and they have a mother, and, you know, you're doing, you know, really good by them and by their mother, and their mother may develop, you know, feelings, you know, emotional feelings that may originate from the gratitude that she has towards, you know, the man. And, you know, these emotional feelings, you know, can, yeah, I mean, they can become real. And, you know, it could pose a problem if maybe something like, you know, a polygynous marriage was not, you know, an option or whatever. I mean, you understand what I'm saying? Like,
can I just interject to on this point? Very important. What you know, brother, excellent. You know, you raised a very, very excellent point, and based on our collective experience, which I concur with. You know, because I mean, we have to look at things from our collective experience. If our collective experience does not rhyme with what Allah is saying, then we will be doubting it. And just to give you two examples, you know, a commitment is different. You know, when one marries legally, you know, under the statutes of the government, then within one is obliged. Absolutely, what you said. There's a commitment, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah, exactly. That's, you know, that's number one. And the other one is that I found that commitments bind the person. Even, you know what? I mean, a man can have kids and he may ignore them. Nothing prevents that.
Right.
In many cases, right? But a commitment is something that a person has with Allah. It's not with a government. You know, just to give an example, I recently was, you know, visiting poor families in Palestine, and I try sometimes with whatever I have to help. But then I said to myself, you know, we're just trying to, whenever we have money, we throw it here and there. But if we commit to helping a family, you know, to sustain that family, so they, at least, no matter how little, even if it's $100 a month, you know, they can plan things which is good for them. But then I found myself committing myself because I gave my word.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
In fact, you know, I will even go as far, you know, I'll put my, I guess, business out. My wife, actually, how our relationship really developed was that, you know, we kind of met like through social media. You know, she lives like in Africa, you know, I'm trying to get her here. But anyway, you know, we kind of initially met through social media, and it started off with me pretty much, you know, trying to contribute, you know, like, you know, I know her brother and stuff. He lives in New York. But anyway, you know, I just kind of started off helping, you know, the family. And I decided to commit myself to it, you know, because I saw that, man, you know, it's really helping and they're really in need. And over time, you know, we kind of like developed, you know, a friendship and, you know, respect and admiration for each other. But then it became a thing where we started to really admire each other's character. And, you know, as a result, love came out of it. And, you know, we eventually got married. And this may, you know, be kind of a thing, but I'm going to say it. At the time, I was already married, you know, when this happened. And I, you know, like within my marriage, you know, of my I guess she's passed away, well, ex-wife anyway. But anyway, when I was in that marriage, I had my you know, had brought this up, you know, like we had the idea about a second marriage or whatever had come up. And, you know, it was the result of that, you know, like it started off really with wanting to help, you know, the children, you know, of my wife and, you know, her family and all of that, you know. So that, you know, pretty much the way what I take from, you know, like in Surah Nisa, the first
Absolutely. You know, I just say, brother, you know, we sometimes overlook the commitment. When we have a solemn, you know, commitment to Allah, to anyone. I mean, you know, even not to Allah, when we give a word to someone, I don't know, it's frightened us when we want to break that word. There's something really interesting in us. I just, let's say, brother, you know, Ibrahim, I'm gonna call you, and one time, in fact, between the two of us, I said I'm gonna get in touch with you, and I was delayed, but it was on my mind, you know. It was, and then eventually I called you and we talked. Because it was lingering, as if it's a do loop in my brain that it has to be fulfilled. Okay, brother Mumtaz, I think.
Yeah, thank you. So my question is very simple, and one point which I got it in today's discussion is that only adults are entitled to marry, not infants or smaller than that age. So that is very important point, which is the misunderstanding prevalent in the people, in the Muslims, that has been removed. Second, you said that one person, there is a difference between aw and wow in 4.3. So what is that difference? I mean, it means we can marry, there is no limit, or
okay,
what is that difference?
All right. So now we need to establish in a logical way that this verse and the previous verse and the other verses have to do with yatama.
Yes.
You know, I mean, that's very important for us to establish that. And Allah is basically trying to is intervening to help us deal with the yatama. You know, one may say, wait a minute, but is it really a burning issue in life? Well, for Allah, it's a burning issue. You know, it's a burning issue. Yes, absolutely. You know, it's not quantity. It's not if there's 1 million yatama, then we should be concerned. Allah gives the yatama who are fewer in society a lot of attention, a lot of attention. You know, I mean, we know that just watching a yatim in an orphanage breaks one's heart, right? I mean, when they ask for a toy and they cannot get it. I mean, look at how Allah is, should I say it, delicate and sensitive to the needs of the least able and least privileged. You know, even our sons and kids, our kids who have fathers who can provide them with many things that they want, even if we think that they desire something and we're not going to get it for them, we feel so bad. You know, so Allah is exceptionally sensitive. That's number one. So number two, now we shift to polygamy. Okay, now we shift to polygamy. Polygamy is something that society regulates. You know why? Because Allah talked about the haram in the Mus'haf. He didn't talk about the halal. You know, if you were to talk about the halal, then Allah needs to keep sending a revelation after revelation, billion pages of books, 1 year after the other. Is the iPhone halal or haram? you know, is sorry, is using the toilet. You know, they used to say it's haram, using the faucet. You know, the annals of Muslim tradition is replete with bizarre fatawi, bizarre. Okay, so the whole entire Mus'haf from page end to end, Allah doesn't regulate how many a man can marry. You know what? It doesn't. Does that mean this is a green light for people to marry a second one, a third, a fourth? You know, it depends on society. It depends on the regulations. It depends on the times. You know, there are times where there's a lot of men. You know, the number of women are much more than the number of men. I don't want to go into these scenarios to claim that, oh, you know, it's good to do. There's, you know, I know, for instance, in some African nations, many women don't care if they marry 50, if a man marries 10 or 20, if he feeds them, take good care of them, they don't care. There are many examples of that, right? So now, does that mean that society cannot regulate that? No, society can. In other words, when Tunisia, a long time ago, they said we're going to ban multiple marriages, the Muslims many Muslim clergy went up in arms. This is kufr. What's so kufr about it? You know, I mean, you know, the government can say, you know, in Pakistan, we will penalize anyone who slaughters a sheep because we have a very few sheep and we want to take care of them. Is it haram? It's not haram. Right? But if you are found doing it, they'll penalize you. The government has the right to ban, but no one has the right to make haram. You know?
Okay, I got the point.
Okay, so now that's one thing. Now, when you come to the so-called tradition and the so-called sunnah and the parallel religion, you find, according to the parallel religion folks, you find that the Prophet married 9 at one time. Right? Okay, so you open the pages and you try to say, but why aren't we supposed to follow the sunnah of the Prophet? You know what they say? Oh no, this was an exception. What? Why it was an exception? Where does it say in the Quran that was exception? Okay, Abu Bakr, Umar, Ali. How about Ali? He had 9 or 10 at one time. After Fatima died, nobody disputes from Shia Sunni that he had 9 wives because, you know, he was poor later on, he became rich, so he can afford. So if the Prophet's marriage to multiple women was an exception, why did Ali do it? Okay, so, you know, this takes us into this sphere of the haram and the mamnu'a. You know, haram is one thing, and mamnu'a, you know, a very similar point is, which is many Muslims think of it as controversial, is slavery. Is slavery haram or halal? Where does it say slavery haram in the Quran? You know, when Allah says to make up for some sin or some wrongdoing, you free a slave. Wait a minute, it means it's halal. Right?
but there is no entry point. You cannot
means,
make anyone slave.
No, that's different. That's different. But I'm talking about, is it haram or halal? It is something that is despicable. It is something that is, you can go on and describe it with any adjectives you want. But is it haram?
No.
There's no. Exactly. Does that mean we should fight against? Yes, we can fight against, you know, I fight against those who, you know, I'm a food advocate. Those who eat too much beef and French fries and all of that, they will have heart problems. Okay.
Right.
So there's so many things, bad things for us. And I think many Muslims are not getting this big concept, is that the human agency is so powerful. Human agency is extremely powerful. You know, they need to think. They need to think what to regulate, what to allow, what not to allow. However, the harams are there, done, 14 items or 13 items in the Quran, and that's it. And that's a time invariant rules, time invariant. Absolutely. Now, but you see, so I just said slavery is not haram. That doesn't mean, you see, they extrapolate, you know. So let's say, okay, we have slaves. Does that mean that I can take a woman, a slave, and sleep with her? Absolutely not. You see? Absolutely not. Okay, because the other level of extrapolation that developed is completely bogus. Is completely bogus. The extrapolation, and how can slaves come about? You know, let's talk about the Mus'haf. You know, Allah says, if you fight, if you have a fight, okay, and you take prisoners, فَأَمَّا مَنًّا وَأَمَّا فِدَاءً. Okay, they give you money and you let go, or you exchange. And Allah says the Prophet doesn't take asra, doesn't take prisoners. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. So anyone else?
Yes, I have a question. Well, I guess a comment rather.
Okay.
You know, with a few things with regards to slavery. You know, I think that, yeah, it's no doubt that the Quran didn't just like declare it as haram, but the fact that every you know, there are so many ayats in the Quran that you know, that pretty much it like it gave every excuse or reason to free a slave, pretty much. And I think in that process, in fact, even the bitter or the righteousness was considered, you know, one of the acts or attributes of righteousness was considered to, you know, the freeing of slaves, you know, in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 177. But the thing of what that was doing was, it was actually leading to the emancipation of the institution of slavery without saying it's haram, because if freeing the slave is considered a virtuous act, or it's a means of atoning for one's sins, then that will ultimately lead, you know, if that is, you know, practiced over time, it would ultimately lead to slavery being frowned upon, and eventually it would lead to the human beings themselves declaring that slavery is.
Yeah,
You know,
is there any question in it?
That is the wisdom that I see, you know, in the Mus'haf, you know, with regards to, you know, like it pretty much encourages and even commands, you know, when it comes to atonement, the freeing of slaves. Okay, my second point, what I wanted to kind of mention was with regards to polygyny, you know, and governments, you know, making it against the law. Well, you know, the thing about that though, I kind of have like here in the U.S., I think it's kind of
Brother Ibrahim, can you please be brief, because there is another person.
Oh, okay. Yeah, just here in the U.S., when it comes to polygyny, you know, it's criminalized, and in a way, to me, right now, as I see that law, it's a very hypocritical and unjust law, because, you know, the same man and the same women that, you know, would be in a polygynous relationship, if they were just, you know, committing zina, it's not criminalized, whereas polygyny is criminalized. So to me, that's kind of it's an unjust and a very hypocritical law, because it's criminalized not on the basis of morals as they claim, you know. So
okay,
that's pretty much what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Sure. Just a quick comment is that yes, I agree with both points, brother, that you raised. Absolutely. And as far as you raised a very good point regarding slavery, is that you know, I can think of two ways to have slaves. Two ways. The first one is that you have a war, okay, and if you have a war, then Allah clearly says that there's no possibility for slaves, okay. The second one is that you go and kidnap someone. Right? And if you kidnap someone, then obviously this is against the rules of Islam. So it's very clear. The second one, of course, you know, there's a lot of hypocrisy in many laws around the world. But I think that the Western, at least as North American laws, are structured to give women rights. And it is structured in a certain way. Of course, it can be structured such that if a man married two women, then you know, he can give them rights. But anyways, that's a different story. Brother Hamid.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
My question, I don't know Arabic, you know Arabic, and I've been thinking about how this is the Quranic Arabic is different than the Arabic of Arabs. First of all, we've been struggling for last 1400 years. And everybody is coming up with the different ideas, different interpretations, different meanings. That's fine. I mean, you can do that with any language. But as we know, the language, a lot of words in the Quran, which Arabs even didn't know, which I was surprised. And then but at the time of Banu Umayyah, when the capital was Damascus, and that's where majority of the things came into existence, sarf, nahv, all the dictionaries, all the interpretations, all the tafsirs, all the history developed, where majority was Christians at that capital. So I was wondering if they manipulated the whole language and tried to match those words of Quran into Arabic words and then interpreted it the way Arabic was transformed over a period of time. Let's take an example. Shahr Ramzan. Ramazan means it's not a month. Ramazan means a difficult time, a harsh time, a turmoil. And Shahra doesn't mean month, right? Shahra means one is obvious, which is very, very, you know, we use in Urdu mashhur, which is famous, which becomes prevalent in a society. When a harsh time becomes prevalent in a society. Things like that. I'm just giving you an example. I'm not saying, but later on, probably what they did, they made a month's name, Muharram or Ramadan or whatever not, and matched that month to this month of Quran. But Quran is not talking about any month. The Quran came down over 23 years, if we say so. If Quran claims, doesn't claim actually, but it doesn't come in 1 month. So we cannot impose things on God's words on our Arabic language. So what I think humans, what we should do, we are in a time where our human intellect has grown up, our understanding has changed. So forget about what happened in the past. It could be, as you mentioned, it could be there's a different methodology which could be derived from the Quran, has nothing to do with Arab. Then Allah become biased. It's for Arabic. The Quran is for Arabic people. No, it has to be for Rahmat, it's Alameen. To me, this language has nothing to do with Arabs. The language has to be derived, the meaning has to be derived, the understanding and the context has to be derived from the Quran. we have to come up with, because it's very good to have an Arabic background. I understand that, but that doesn't mean the language of Arab poets or the language they made in Surf and Nahv, or later on dictionaries and all that in later on 300-400 years later, it doesn't mean that Quran is talking about the same thing. So we have to understand whatever word Quran is using is specifically used by God, and we have to take it in.
I think there was a full
Brother-
lecture of Dr. Omar on
Brother,
this.
Yeah,
So Dr. Omar,
I-
you can explain. Yeah.
yes, sir. Yes, brother Habib. I talked a lot about this actually. I talked about, and I'm really happy that you're saying this. And I worked very, very hard. In fact, in the past, I said things that people took with a did not take very lightly, and I meant what I said. I talked a lot about language extensively. I meant to empower people to say that the Arab, they used to teach us a hadith when I lived in Saudi years ago. And I don't know why this hadith disappeared. Okay. I'm not against what the Prophet said, but I believe that the parallel religion is false. Now, the hadiths that I believe in are usually less than a line in length. Okay, one of them, al-Arabiyyatu bil-lisan, 2 words. This hadith disappeared. I don't know why nobody's mentioning it. In other words, you from Turkestan, you from Tajikistan, you from Malaysia, you speak the language, you are an Arab. Now, see, Allah is fair and just, and he repeats that. From my experience, I said this repeatedly, I learned Arabic, the meaning of words, from so-called non-Arabs. Now, let's go over a few things very important. Allah doesn't say Arab, does not describe an Arab in the Quran.
Right.
An Arab as a person doesn't. He describes Arab. Arab is the one who is pretending to be an Arab, but he never describes Arab. Arab literally means something which is complete, youthful, regenerative. Okay, and this brings us to something that I really hope that some of us and others will take to heart. When Allah says "Allama Adam al-asma'a kullaha," I talked about this before. This is deep, 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 deep. "Allama Adam al-asma'a kullaha." Arabic is a language that started from zero. Now, people think that I'm biased towards Arabic. No, it's not my language. It's the language. Allah chose to speak this language. Allah is using nature to talk to us. This is something important, really important. People say, look, you're an Arab. Oh, well, did they put any effort? I teach at the university. In 2 years, young students by the age of 20, they master differential equations, and which is a very complex topic. Okay. I recently been listening to some Chinese speaking Arabic. We used to say that Chinese have a hard time pronouncing R.
Yeah.
I was at fault. My goodness, right now there's huge institutions in China, and people, it used to be Japan, by the way, now in China. So if one puts the effort, okay, then one can move forward. Now, another thing I want to say is that Nahu, Sarf, and all of that, brother, trash this, put it out of the completely. I can show you books that can frighten anyone who wants to learn Arabic, but they never taught us, and I'm a product of Arab schooling, except for 2 years I was in, They never taught us the meaning of words. They never taught us the meaning of words. So they never taught us that daraba has so many meanings. They never taught us qata'a. You talk to the Arabists, what is the difference between qata'a and qata'a? They'll tell you something that has nothing to do with the Mus'haf. Okay, that's number one. The other thing I wanted to go back to is that Allah stresses logic. Today we had a demonstration is that Allah uses things concisely. A hydrogen atom has a certain number of objects, not more, not less. Okay, so that's the same Allah, the one who created this, the one who's using language. Okay, so I want to get to something very specific you mentioned. So logic is very important. Context is very important, and the broad meaning of the words is important. So if we take the Oxford Dictionary and we look at the word 8, you know, they give you 50 meanings. So this is any language. There's 50 meanings to 8. Okay, so
it's like 7 in Arabic. 7.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So we keep confining. So logic is number one. Logic. Okay. Now, when you mentioned two things, just to conclude, you mentioned Ramadan. I don't think Ramadan comes from what you said. Ramadan comes from the word Ramadan, because when we derive something, Ramad is early rain in September, late September. So Ramadan is a month that is constant traditionally with the solar system. Okay, by the way, you know, this is something we can discuss later, because you know, I'm beginning to believe that we're not fasting at the right time. But anyways, we leave that till a different.
With the lunar system, that changes with sometimes in summer, sometimes in winter, sometimes in
and I don't think that's correct. I think that Ramadan comes at the same time every year according to the solar system. But anyways, we can. But my point is that Ramadan, it means that the early rain in the fall, the shahr. Now, how shahr?
Ramazan means it's hot, like a
Ramad. There's a difference between a Ramad and Ramadan. A Ramad. Now, we you know, we can debate this.
We can.
Now,
that's what I'm saying. We can keep going on words.
But there's something that's very important, because you know, there's a reality. There is a reality. I cannot mess with reality. Okay, you know, if I throw this pin, it will fall, whether I describe gravity in any way I wish. Okay, so where does that take us? Take us to right now. There's so many people who are interpreting the Quran. Okay, now thanks to YouTube.
Is that good or bad?
I'll tell you. Okay, it's neither good nor bad. You know, technology is neither good or bad. Okay, this coloring things black and white, I don't believe in it. So now, I tend to listen to many people who come up with different interpretations, and because you want to strengthen yourself. Am I wrong or not?
Exactly.
I found some of them based on no logic at all. I'm not going to mention names here. Absolutely not. Some have, I can easily refute their explanation easily, because it's not based on logic. It's based on emotionalism. It's based on hand waving and so forth. Okay. So anybody can interpret the Mus'haf. The question is, it has to be logical and meaningful and consistent with the rest of the Mus'haf. Okay, consistent with the rest of the Mus'haf. Now, but don't be alarmed. If you open, I can mention to you 13 classical, huge, big, traditional translations. I think they're much more preposterous than what we have today. Much more preposterous. I mean, they're bizarre, completely bizarre. Today, you know, before we came to the meeting today, I just wanted to see what some people have said about some of the verses. Oh my goodness, it's nonsense. It's completely nonsense. One person said that, one person said that, and then at the end we had a disagreement. So there's, you know, if a person doesn't put the effort, okay, if a person doesn't put the effort, that person will always be confused, period. You know, I give this advice to a very dear person to me. I said, you know, just take advice from those who have knowledge. You know, take advice, you know, you want to take advice from those who give you something substantial. You know, I'm not worried about this. Absolutely not worried. In fact, I stand, if any one of us find that I interpreted anything wrong today, please, you'll do me the best favor in my life by writing to me and tell me that you're wrong because so and so and so. At the end of the day, this is the last word I want to say, is that having a scientific engineering background, okay, which is something that is grounded in reality, all our interpretations have to make sense and have to be grounded in reality. It's as simple as that, you know. Okay, brothers, I hope that will be sufficient for today.
That's
Thank you.
great. And any other question before we end?
Just because of time, I think we really have to
Yeah.
conclude maybe now.
Okay.
Because of time.
That was a great discussion today, question answers. So if you still have any question, you can pass it on to me and Dr. Omar. The recording has been done, so we will also publish it. And now we thank you very much for all of you for coming and joining us. We end our meeting. And
just one word, Brother Moses, thank you
Yeah.
so much for keeping this forum, you know, live, even though we sometimes get very busy. But if we don't put the energy, honestly, we don't consider going into the Mus'haf further. So thank you, thanks to you.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. See you next
Assalamu
week.
alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.